Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine.
Joe. Little fucking Joe Lindsley.
Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
Overnight, the Ukrainian Air Force shot down 22 out of 33 Russian drones. Let's get the latest from Ukraine. Joseph Lindsley. Joe, are things quiet at this moment?
Well, Bob, here in Kyiv, where I traveled, I took the train last night from Lviv, the express train to Kyiv, and it's calm here. We did have 2 rounds of air raid alarms this morning. That was due to there were Russian jets over the Russian Federation, the type of jets that are capable of carrying the hypersonic missiles. But there was no attack here. But indeed, it's pretty normal now to have these drone incursions. And I wanted to share with you, we hear these words so often. We hear about the missiles, we hear about the drones that are supplied and made by Iran, these suicide drones, and I think it's one thing to hear about it, but it's another thing to actually feel what it's like in these moments of attack. And when the missiles are fired, it's instant. You don't have any warning. Especially if you're near the front lines, there's not even an air raid alarm. But the thing about the drones is they make this sort of moped-like noise, like a lawnmower, and you can hear it coming towards you. And often they're dancing and moving around in different directions to confuse the air defense and to increase the level of terror. And I want to share with you a little clip of what a drone impact sounds like. And this is from two nights ago in the seaside city of Odesa. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear it's just a 20-second clip. At the beginning, you'll hear some other explosions, which is air defense, because multiple drones were hitting the city at one time. But this was from the CCTV in a flower shop. So it was the middle of the night. No one was there, but there are people that live above that shop, and that apartment building was hit. But just imagine you're watching a video in this little flower shop, or imagine you're there in the flower shop, and you can hear the sound of the Iranian drone coming your way. And then I'll warn everybody at about 12 seconds in, there's a loud noise of impact. And then if you listen very carefully at the end, it's a pretty haunting sound. And so this is, let's take a listen to the sound of a real drone impact in Odesa 2 nights ago.
Wow. That is unbelievable, Joe. Over the holidays, we were on vacation, and I was in a park, and I looked up and saw a drone overhead, and I kept thinking about you and what you folks think there when you see a drone.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's good and bad, because Ukrainians are using drones to great effect. In fact, thanks to some listeners to WGN, we bought some drones the other day, and so I was able to see these before they went to the front. And so the Ukrainians use them very well. But these Iranian drones, they're not very tall, but they take up about the same space of a Mini Cooper, and they're it's just a haunting thing to think about how they fly through the country at night, usually often over rivers. They fly very low to avoid detection until they get to a city where they go higher in order to reach their target. And think about how this becomes the soundtrack for the past 2 years of people's lives. I remember once I was in the nation of Georgia in a little village, and it was in a canyon, and there was a very loud river in the village. And the villagers were toasting the river. They said, "This is the soundtrack of our lives. We grew up with the noise of the river, and we remember it always." And I was just thinking of that because everyone in Ukraine, from the young to the very old, the soundtrack, in Lviv, the soundtrack is the air raid alarms. In Kharkiv, the soundtrack is the awful thud of hypersonic missiles and other types of missiles hitting. The front lines, the soundtrack is, the constant sound of artillery fire. And in so many cities throughout the country, it's that menacing lawnmower-like sound of these Iranian drones, and they cause a lot of damage. And this is, this is it's hard. I mean, to really imagine and feel like how in cities in the center of a beautiful city like Odesa, what kind of demonic madness would launch such a hellfire upon these cities. And this is exactly the message that President Zelensky is trying to relate right now as world leaders gather in Switzerland for the World Economic Forum in Davos. And, it's a difficult thing because, and Zelensky knows this, we think that we've had actors, we had Ronald Reagan, an actor president, and Zelensky is an actor, and he knows how to reach people. And if you only tell people the bad stuff, they tune out, and he knows this. And so in his speech today in Davos, he brought humor, and he's doing everything he can to keep the world interested. And he pointed out that the Patriot missile systems from the U.S., he said, they've been so effective here in Ukraine. He says not only has it shocked the Russians, but it's shocked Ukraine's Western partners, including the creators of that system, the United States. And as we look at, we talked the other day about those two Russian planes that two of the best planes in Russia's Air Force, very instrumental for Russia to unleash attacks upon Ukraine. And Ukraine shot them down. And we probably won't know all the details of this for a while, but there's great indication that it was Ukrainian ingenuity taking different elements of weapons sent from the West with their limited resources to take down these two Russian planes. And I think, perhaps the timing was even intentional as we go, as Zelensky, knew he was going to Davos and to have a chance to make the case. But, it's a very difficult situation he's in because, the Americans on both the left and the right who are sort of fed up with corruption in America and all the money that Washington spends and the usual nonsense in Washington, they deeply distrust anything connected to the World Economic Forum or Davos. And Zelensky's aware of that. And so he needs those European leaders and the world leaders and the financiers. He needs their support, but he can't be totally of them. And he's not of them. Ukrainians are also skeptical of that. They're very independent-minded, free people. And, and I've been very intensely the past months, really, speaking with Americans I know about why, Americans who are skeptical of Ukraine and, why are they skeptical? And they tell me that, that they're tired, they're frustrated with all the problems they perceive in the United States. And whenever they hear President Zelensky when they read headlines about Zelensky, they think he's just begging for money. And they just don't see the possibility of what victory means. And so I think that's a picture that President Zelensky is trying to paint, and to do it with humor and to say, hey, look, these amazing weapons from the U.S., they really work really well. And not only that, but Ukrainians are making them even more powerful, better. And hopefully that optimism can start to inspire some of these skeptics in America.
President Zelensky has his work cut out for him, especially with the focus now on the Middle East and Pakistan and Iran. Although, Joseph, I don't know if you heard about this, but I'm sure it made you happy to hear that J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon said supporting Ukraine is the United States putting America first.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's two senses of that. One is very practical, in the sense of, well, probably three senses. One is it's a testing ground for our weapons, so we can improve our own resources. And two, it's security for Europe and the world, so we can prevent having a world war. But that argument doesn't really resonate with lots of Americans. They just don't want to hear that. They take it as a threat. And then the third thing is that Ukraine, and this is what the people in Davos, they don't understand because they come from the elite champagne drinking world. Ukraine is a country of faith, family, and freedom. It's like the Texas of Europe. I know that because I'm here. But that part of the Ukrainian story gets missed. And so this is one of the barriers that Ukrainians know that they have to break through. And, the people who know what the reality of Ukraine are also the Russians. And, I quoted briefly yesterday the words of the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, who was really a puppet of Putin. But I left out this one thing he said that probably was the most chilling thing I've heard. He said, Ukrainians will realize that life in a big common state, which they do not much love now, is better than death, better than the death and the death of themselves and of their loved ones. And the sooner that Ukrainians realize this, the better. And it is such a chilling threat, and there is such a deep hatred for Ukraine from the Russians. And I think there's even a fear, there has been a fear of Ukraine from people, from whether it's Macron or other people at Davos, because Ukrainians are uncontrollable and so fiercely free. And so maybe this is a moment where Ukrainians can show the world that, freedom, it's scary to face these missiles, but it's something that is worth fighting for. And maybe that can inspire people who are a little bit depressed around the world right now.
That would be nice. Joseph Lindsley in Kyiv. Keep the faith, Joe. We'll talk tomorrow.
Till tomorrow. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що він сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?